Hello, everybody. We're going to welcome in Ross Jackson from our friends at Locked On Saints. Ross, what's going on, buddy? I love the Dome Patrol poster in the background. A little Sam Mills action in there, too. So that Carolina-New Orleans
That's
crossover
right.
is strong today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had to make sure that these guys were ready for us today, but always a pleasure to be here with you, bud. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Ross, I think the news that Sean Payton had been requested to be interviewed by the Panthers was met with a mix of intrigue and disgust in Carolina because of what Sean Payton meant for the Saints against the Panthers, especially in the latter half of his run in New Orleans. I mean, he had Carolina's number. He wasn't afraid to show his emotion and happiness beating Carolina. What were Saints fans' thoughts, do you think, about seeing the Panthers show up on the list of teams looking to interview Sean Payton?
Yeah, I think it was a tricky moment for Saints fans because I think everyone expected that Carolina would enter this conversation at the very least, and very likely at least be granted an interview. But I think it was a whole new sort of situation once the news had come about that that's actually on the way, that is indeed happening. And so I think it was met with a little bit of hesitancy from Saints fans, even though they were sort of expecting it to be the case in the first place. It's a whole different ballgame once it all actually plays out in front of you.
Yeah, and of course, Carolina just one of a handful of teams on the list of squads looking to interview Payton. Who else is kind of looking like they're serious about talking to Sean Payton and bringing him in for interviews right now?
Yeah, the biggest one would be the Denver Broncos, who are set to meet with him in Los Angeles on Tuesday morning, the 17th. So basically, as quickly as they're able to get an in-person interview with him, they're doing it. And they're going to meet him over in Los Angeles because they don't want him showing up to Denver, Colorado right now, showing him the weather. They want to go and do like the nice, we'll meet you in
Yeah.
Los Angeles where it's nice and pretty. But so they're kind of the big ones. The Arizona Cardinals are also on the list, have received, permission to interview Payton, as have the Houston Texans, but so far no interviews have been set, at least to our knowledge, at this time. So right now, Denver is kind of at the forefront of it all when it comes to the in-person interview process.
And obviously, and for fans who don't know, Sean Payton's still under contract with the Saints. When he announced his stepping away, I guess, so to speak, I'm not
Yep.
sure it's a retirement because we all kind of expect him to come back. So there will be compensation involved. And for a team like Carolina to try to pluck Sean Payton away from an interdivision rival like New Orleans, that compensation package is going to be pretty heavy. What do you think in general teams are looking at as far as going to get Sean Payton from the Saints? And then taking it even further, what are the Saints going to ask the Panthers for if that whole thing comes to fruition?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing is that, of course, every team has something different to offer. So there's no real hard and fast rule around what the Saints are expecting here. I think the Saints would like to get a first round pick in 2023. But for instance, if Sean Payton were to say, send me over to the Arizona Cardinals, for instance, it's very unlikely you're going to get the number 3 overall selection out of the Arizona Cardinals coffers. So you're probably looking at a high second round pick. So obviously it varies place to place, but that's effectively the starting asking price is a first round pick and building a package around that. You think back to John Gruden back in 2002 when he was traded from the then Oakland Raiders to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was 2 firsts, 1 in 2022, 1 in 23, and then the same thing, but 2 seconds, as well as some cash considerations. Bill Belichick was traded with a first round selection that was number 16 overall, and some other draft compensation. Paul Tagliabue forced the Bill Parcells trade, which included a first round pick in 2 years from when that trade happened, 1997 to 1999. And so therein lies the big piece about what happens when it's in division. There was a pretty big return for Bill Belichick heading to New England. There was a pretty big return for Bill Parcells heading out of New England. And so that becomes a big piece that you're looking at here, is that there is precedent around having a head coach traded within the division, but you should expect the team to pay the premium of premiums in that case. So I would expect multiple, picks in the first 2 days in 2023, and then multiple picks spanning the draft. That could be a day 1 pick as well as some day 3 selections, things like that in the second day, in 2024. It is worth also just reminding folks that players can't be traded in these coach trades, so it has to be draft compensation.
Yeah, good reminder there. What is Sean Payton's relationship like with ownership in New Orleans? Because it's kind of this tricky dance they're all playing. I mean, he wants to coach another team, and they want compensation. I mean, are they willing to say, okay, we'll trade you to that team and maybe take less than that team would give us for you. I mean, I guess they don't really have a choice because he doesn't have to coach where he doesn't want to coach.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. The relationship is still very good here in New Orleans between Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints organization, ownership, general manager. Mickey Loomis, of course, is one of his closest friends, but they all understand, everybody that's a part of this process understands that this is a big business decision that the organization has to make, that Sean has to make in terms of where he wants to go and where he wants to be. But ultimately, that will be the most important piece. Where does Sean Payton want to coach in his return in 2023, should he return? If there are no suitors out there, and, Sean doesn't feel that there is enough for, whether it be ownership relationship, organizational relationship, quarterback, whatever it might be, if he doesn't pick a team, he goes right back to Fox and he goes right back to, being a studio analyst, and no skin off his back. But for the New Orleans Saints, they'd certainly love to make sure that they're at least ushering him back into the NFL in 2023 so that they can recoup some of the draft capital that they're looking to have and are really in need of based upon what you saw from this team in 2022.
Do you think Sean Payton really entertains the idea of going to a team that doesn't have the position of quarterback settled? I mean, that's where we are, in Carolina. Denver has a quarterback. Maybe he thinks he can turn Russell Wilson back around. Arizona has an intriguing option, obviously, and Kyler Murray. Do you really think he considers somewhere where he just has no idea what quarterback is going to look like, especially if he comes to Carolina and they give him their top 10 pick?
Yeah, that would be the tricky part is, do you bring Sean Payton in and offload your top 10 pick, understanding Carolina would have to pay, like I mentioned, the premium of premiums in order to get Payton across the division to Carolina. So are you leveraging that top 10 pick as a move to get Sean Payton in the building because he'll be able to hopefully draft a quarterback that he wants, maybe even trade up within the top 10 using some capital from 2024, but you're going to have to trade some of that capital away to get Sean Payton in the building in the first place. So it's going to be a bit of a trickier situation for Carolina out of most of the other franchises out there. But if, Sean Payton has, let's say, an idea of a free agent quarterback that he'd like to go out there and get, there were a lot of rumors about him and Tom Brady traveling as a package deal. That might not be the case, but he's the kind of coach that entices that kind of talent. So maybe he has another sort of avenue of bringing in a quarterback, or doesn't mind what 2023 looks like with the outlook of 2024 or 2025 right down the way. So that's all going to kind of depend on what his plan is for any specific franchise, and if that organization agrees with that plan as well. That's all part of that interview process. I do know that he values relationships with ownership, the organization, more than he is concerned about the quarterback situation, which isn't to say, though, that he's not concerned about the quarterback situation.
Don't want to ask you to speculate. I'll ask you to make an educated guess where things stand here right now, Monday, January 16th. Does Sean Payton come back to the NFL for 2023? And who is the leader in the clubhouse? I guess we can ask.
Yeah, I think of the 4 positions that have currently been granted permission to speak to Sean Payton, with them being who they are, with the Denver Broncos, Houston Texans, Arizona Cardinals, and now, of course, the Carolina Panthers, I would say I'm about 40% that he's back in coaching in the NFL in 2023. I think the leaders in the pack, I have a hard time delineating between the two, but the leaders in the pack for me are the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos. I think Carolina brings a very promising and enticing offer because of the defense that's there, especially knowing that Sean Payton wants to bring a guy like Vic Fangio potentially along with him as defensive coordinator. Him matched up with some of those young defensive pieces in Carolina would be absolutely outstanding. And so that helps you with, regardless of who your quarterback is, how good your defense is, it maximizes how good your offense can be. So I do think they come in with something intriguing there, but I think that Arizona having the open GM spot is a huge X factor for him, because he could bring a guy like a Jeff Ireland or a Kai Harley along with him from New Orleans. And then, of course, in Denver, just really solid ownership, really stable environment there. So that's a place that's going to pique his interest. And that's barring any other teams potentially entering the sweepstakes at a later point.
Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. Great as always, man. And enjoy watching the playoffs this year. Hopefully next year we'll both be back in the mix covering things.
Always love a 3-game New Orleans Saints, Carolina Panthers season, man. It's always one of my favorites. I appreciate you, buddy.
We didn't like the last one, but yeah, maybe next year. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, bud.